Good afternoon. Welcome to the Batman Show. We've got Ian in the house and Erik in the house, and I'm in my house, so we're all here. How is everyone?
Fantastic.
Superb.
Superb.
How are you?
All right. Fantastic and superb. Cool. On a somber note, real fast, the Queen was laid to rest today, so thoughts with our British friends across the way.
Very kind. I've been watching the coverage of it today. It's one thing the British know how to do is this kind of somber pageantry, and I think they've done an absolutely sterling job. It was an impressive set of events.
So where will she be buried at?
I think she's going to be buried in, I think it's St George's Chapel in Windsor Castle. So they had the service at Westminster today, and then they drove the hearse up to Windsor Castle, which is only about half an hour away from London. So there was a short service when they got there, and there's a private service with the royal family tonight. Oh.
Erik, where did I just do?
Erik, are you still there?
Yeah, I'm still here. I just had to fix something on my camera, so I apologize.
Okay.
I didn't want everybody to.
Okay.
But now I think everything's broken, so just give me a minute.
we can still hear you.
Yeah, just gotta get the camera back up, and hopefully that's better. There we go. I tried to avoid that. I didn't want the notifications on my phone because I use my phone as my webcam, so I didn't want all that. I usually turned it off, and I forgot to this time. So,
okay.
Well, welcome.
Just gonna turn the volume down on my phone. Okay, good to go.
Lords of the Scores. Yeah, I was wondering. I was gonna because I put that new poster together, banner together, and I was like, oh, I was gonna put like a AKA Lord of the Scores or another name, just so people would know that it's not a show about Batman.
Did it?
Anyway,
did it post on the StreamYard thing? I thought I changed it. I think I changed it.
I didn't see the change on YouTube, but oh well.
Yeah. Big Al says they're burying her and her husband together, lowered into crypt at the same time. Okay.
Oh wow.
Well, today was Erik's day to pick out the topic, and he went hardcore, my friend. Hardcore.
I'm sure you discovered a lot of new great music in the process, and that's the point.
I have, and I always need more CDs to buy because I don't have enough.
It is really a wonderful discovery once you get into classical music, and especially concert music written by film composers, because you really get a chance to see a different side of some of these composers and what they can do without any restrictions and just using their own imaginations to come up with the music. And some of the stuff is just absolutely glorious, and I can't wait to. I mean, I wish we could play samples today. It's going to be really tough to talk about these things without, I think, playing an excerpt. But I hope those who are listening and are unfamiliar with some of our choices go out and pick them up. And even if you are familiar, I'd love to hear your reactions to our lists and maybe some of the things that we missed. But I really hope, Daniel, that you found a bunch of stuff that you like, but I'm eager to see your lists. So this is going to be an exciting show. And I could have done a list of 20 easy. I could have done a Daniel top 5, no problem.
Well, you came up with 10, and we were trying to limit it to 5 apiece.
Well, I sent the whole pile to you, but I do have 5 that I'm going to talk about today. So
okay,
we could maybe do honorable mentions, but yeah.
Ian, what were your thoughts on this endeavor?
Well, I must admit, apart from the odd little bit of Jerry Goldsmith kind of concert work, he didn't do a huge amount, I don't think, and obviously John Williams has done slightly more, but some of his is I'm not a huge fan of some of John Williams' kind of stuff that he's done away from films. James Horner's done some. But looking into the stuff, people I'd never heard of. You mentioned Andrew Pierce last week, Eric. Looked in his stuff, absolutely stunning stuff that he's got. The stuff that Elliot Goldenthal has done as well. When you say, it's a challenging listen. Some of it, Elliot Goldenthal is bordering on that, but it doesn't quite. It's still
accessible.
Good to listen to. Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
So that was a bit of a revelation. And Lee Holdridge as well. I had no idea about his concert work, and I loved it. Very accessible, Lee Holdridge.
Oh yes.
So no, I've had fun over the past couple of weeks listening to this stuff.
That's excellent. Yeah, Pierce. I just want to put it out there. Pierce is about the most gracious and wonderful human beings I've had the pleasure of chatting with, and I really wish he had gone a little bit further in his career. I'm not 100% sure what he's doing now. We kind of lost touch on Facebook's usually how we talk to each other, and he sent me a whole bunch of his music. Earlier on we were chatting, and he would talk about what he was working on now, what he was orchestrating, and what he was doing. But he also felt a bit sad that he wasn't getting the opportunities that he thought he deserved, and I think he deserves to be writing film scores. But I when you listen to Cinema Symphony, which we can talk about later, which is just a love letter to the 20th century film music, you realize that sort of stuff isn't going to fly in film today, which is unfortunate. But I'm glad he was able to get that out, to express himself through his music, and was able to record Cinema Symphony, and at least it's out there. But just the nicest, kindest person I've ever met, and I just hope that somebody picks up on him and gives him that opportunity. But it's probably never going to happen.
Well, I kind of have my notes divided by people's list. I started with Ian's.
Well, do you want to go like one selection each, or do you want to go through each list and talk about them?
Well, Daniel mentioned the list first, so I think he should go first.
Yes.
Okay, well, I'm going to talk about Ian's list because it's right in front of me. It's my notes. You brought up Goldsmith's Fireworks.
Oh, before we go, that's another thing. The stuff that I chose and is, I didn't pick any event music. So there's no Williams Olympic stuff. There's no fireworks, which I would have chosen if I was going to do that. I've just picked strictly concert material. But we can talk about event stuff maybe later on in the show, because there's a couple of whoppers I really want to share with you guys at some point. But yeah, I just want to preface that by saying that I didn't explore any event music. Anyway, sorry, continue, please.
Well,
Ian picked Fireworks, which was commissioned by the Los Angeles Phil in 1999. And Jerry Goldsmith said he wrote it about his childhood growing up in LA, which I thought was interesting. I thought it definitely sounded like Goldsmith.
Yeah, my recording of Fireworks is on a Telarc CD, along with Christus Apollo and Music for Orchestra. So, of all those three pieces, I find Fireworks the most accessible piece on that collection of works. But yeah, I mean, obviously, we can't mention Fireworks if we're going by Eric's rules, but
no.
There's two of us, and there's one of him. So
that's all I did. I mean, I could easily gone for like shorter pieces, but I wanted to really explore like symphonies and concertos and things of that sort. So those are just rules I'd imposed on myself.
Okay, well, I had Fireworks on my list as well, so I do love that piece of music.
And you said you got it on a Telarc CD?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's called Christus Apollo.
Okay, I got that CD too. Yeah.
And they are the premiere recordings of all three of those concert pieces. We had heard of, I think there were rumors, or well, at least we knew of Fireworks, which was performed, I think, I could be wrong. Maybe it was a Hollywood Bowl thing, but I think there was like a fireworks display when they were premiering it. So, and I'm wondering if they still play it. That's a wonderful disc.
Yeah.
On your disc, is the volume seem like it's kind of low on that disc?
No.
It's a different type of recording. Like Goldsmith near the end of his career, and I think starting with Small Soldiers, they backed up the mics. Bruce Botnick definitely backed up the mics. So there's more of a concert hall reverby sound. I mean, especially with that other Telarc album that they released. The details really aren't there, but there is a massive dynamic range. It almost sounds like some of those RSNO recordings. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah,
so that kind of that has some updated pieces that were. I think that album's based on the Suites and Themes album that he recorded in the late '90s, and then he had updated the film suite, which I think included Basic Instinct and Air Force One. And I think he also updated the television suite to include Voyager. And the thing is, none of those updates improve on the suites at all. They almost seem way out of place. But you also get, I think, Forever Young on that album, a nice recording of that. There's an odd presentation of Star Trek: The Motion Picture. And there's a couple of others there. It's the whole point of that album was a demonstration album, I think, for a surround sound or a SACD release of his music. And then they did this demo, and I know there's a demo disc that came out just after they recorded it, and then Telarc picked that up and released that, and then commissioned Goldsmith to record his 3 concert works. So, and I think that's the only time Goldsmith ever collaborated with Telarc, but I thought, man, Goldsmith and Telarc, that's going to be money. But yeah, the recordings are a little weird. You're right, they're a little quiet, a little muffled. The details aren't there. So I would think that any re-recording compilation you want to pick up would be that Suites and Themes album that came out. I think Perez Saraband released it back in the day, and then it was re-released on Silva Screen. Just dynamite. The Blue Max Suite, Gremlins, Patton, MacArthur. Yeah, that's a different cover. Interesting.
Yeah.
What's the title of it?
It's this is called Jerry Goldsmith. The soundtracks of Jerry Goldsmith with the Philharmonia. Now, I think he did a concert in March of 1987. I think it was, and then he went and recorded this. I think either the day after or a couple of days after that concert that was held at the Barbican in London. But it is a stupendous recording. And it has the Blue Max Suite, which is 16 minutes long. It's got that television themes medley. It's got Masada on it, Gremlin Suite, the motion picture themes medley, the general suite, and it's got a recording of Lionheart on there as well. But yeah, you're right. You're right about the Telarc.
That's the alternate cover.
Yeah, it's the same recording though, isn't it?
So this. Yeah, it's the exact same recording.
Yeah.
That's the back of it. It was through Masters Film Music. So that's one of Robert Townsend's earliest releases. Interesting fact about this photo or painting by Bob Peck. This was commissioned for Jerry Goldsmith and a concert that he was supposed to perform in Toronto. So this is Roy Thompson Hall in Toronto. Right here. It's a wonderful venue for the Toronto Symphony Orchestra. The concert never happened. And so it's one of the most famous paintings of Jerry Goldsmith. And so they just reused it for this album called Suites and Themes. But it's interesting they didn't use it for that version of it. Who released it on your end? Is it?
This was released by Derham.
Did I say Bob?
DERAM.
Did I say Bob Peck as the artist? Who did
the artwork for this one?
Yeah. I thought I said Bob Peck for this one, but I might not have.
I mean, it's
Yeah, it says under license from Decca. So is yours Decca?
the Decca record company. Yeah.
Okay. So they must have released, and then he must have got like the U.S. distribution rights. So it says, actually, it's interesting. It said made in Canada. So he's probably still in Whitby at this time. The young Robert
Well,
Johnson.
you're lucky with your cover, because that's
the cover, hideous.
That's just what?
What is that?
Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, it's just, oh, we found a picture in a drawer. Let's use that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, and Townsend had this commission, so I think this is his painting. So he was able to use it. Beautiful. I would love to get that framed. I think even I think I was going to say something now. I lost my train of thought. Oh, I think Bob Peck, I think his family sold prints of that artwork. Anyway,
there's a story behind it. This concert this recording that he made literally a day after a concert. I tried to get tickets for that concert, but I was in training. I was in training with the army at the time, and I was only about half an hour away, just outside London, and I just couldn't. They wouldn't allow me out of the barracks. So
just be like, I'll see y'all tomorrow. I got a concert to go to.
Yeah.
I was 18 at the time, so
it's a beautiful program. Really,
it is.
I mean, I couldn't imagine going to a concert to hear Blue Max for 16 minutes, and you get the television suite, which is just wonderful. The Man from U.N.C.L.E., Dr. Kildare, Room 222, the Waltons, and Barnaby Jones. And again, when he inserted Voyager into this, it just threw the pacing off completely. Then you get Mazada, probably the best recording of that theme. Gremlins Suite, which is fun, and then the Motion Picture Suite, which is the Sand Pebbles, Chinatown, Patch of Blue, Poltergeist, Papillon, and The Wind and the Lion. And he inserted Air Force One and Back to Basic Instinct into that. It doesn't sound right. And then you get the General Suite and then Lionheart. What a program. Masterful. One of my favorite re-recordings of all time. That album's fantastic.
But I love on this one. I'd never heard, when I first got this in the late 80s, I'd never heard of Room 222, or if that's the way you say it. And that was just a really, when you hear the original version compared to the way he's orchestrated it for this is like big and whoa.
Yeah.
And Barnaby Jones is just a stormer of a way to end that suite.
Yeah. Can I see the back of that album? That's not terrible. I like that.
Yeah, the back's okay. It's just that front you don't want to look at.
Yeah, that front's terrible. Oh, that's neat.
Yeah.
And I think Silva then re-released it with edition of Legend on there.
Yeah, I mean the entirety of those recordings are on that as well.
That's right. Yeah. So they must have got the rights from it from Decca.
Yeah.
And speaking of Goldsmith, don't forget Volume 5 just came out from Lala.
Yep.
And
did you get a chance to listen to that podcast?
I did. I listened to it yesterday.
Good.
I couldn't quite.
Sorry, I was going to say I haven't listened to it yet, but I've got it lined up to listen to.
Yeah, and we're talking about the Goldsmith Odyssey. By the way, if you haven't listened to the Goldsmith Odyssey talk on that album and Rudy, I highly recommend you go do that.
So, did they say that they're trying to do more in this series, or this was it?
No. I think they are going to try to do more. It's just now it's becoming much more of a hassle because. And if when you heard the show, it's just like he being Mike Matessino, had to go through about two people in order to get the materials that he needed. One was Nick Redman, who was head of 20th Century Fox Music or something. Anyway, he had the connection with 20th Century Fox Music. And that's how they were able to release all those great 20th Century Fox titles. And then there was another guy that would just transfer the tapes, put them on a hard drive, and sent it to Mike Matessino, and that was it. He began work, and there wasn't a whole lot of bureaucracy to go through. And now Mike has to present this to a room full of like 20 people, and they don't know what's going on, and they've never heard of this, and they're wondering why. It's Disney, and so Disney's getting in the way. It'd be interesting to see if they ever do The Omen, that whole trilogy.
He said he was down for that.
There's a couple of other titles that are through Varese Sarabande that I don't think they'll get for La La Land Records. I mean, Chain Reaction Deluxe Edition came out. I think La La Land owns The Edge. The Mephisto Waltz would be amazing. So there's a whole bunch of great titles that they could probably do. But if it wasn't for this Disney merger and the fact that Nick Redmond passed, I think there would have been a lot more released by now. So, but Mike, if anybody's going to get anything done with 20th Century Fox, it's going to be Mike Matessino. And then when you're thinking about 20th Century Fox, what other scores are you thinking of that he might be able to have access to that are not composed by Jerry Goldsmith? The granddaddies of them all. So, yeah, Matessino's keeping himself busy, that's for sure.
I did find it interesting. He said, like now, you can spend like a week trying to like salvage like 2 minutes of music.
Yeah.
Or you could devote that time to a whole other project getting done. And I was like, wow. But he said he prefers to, at this stage in his life, like, yeah, I'll take the week or however long to save that 2 minutes of music if I need to, just to get it done, because it needs to be done. And I'm like, bravo, good sir. Bravo.
And I'm glad he's teaming up with Chris Malone. I think if there's anyone else that I would want to be touching like any remastering of soundtracks, it would be him. And especially if you're talking about 20th Century Fox titles and anything that was recorded in London with Eric Tomlinson. Chris Malone is an expert on Eric Tomlinson. And if there's anybody that knows what those scores should sound like, he's the guy. And so if they ever get a chance with Star Wars, I'm praying that Malone is going to be in there doing the work for that. I might have mentioned on other shows that he sent me a mix of the Star Wars main title that he did from, I don't know, I forgot what the source was, but he says, hey, this is what Eric Tomlinson's original mix for Star Wars was supposed to sound like. And it was glorious.
Like the original? Like 77?
The original 77, and it was like it was recorded yesterday. It was beautiful. So other people had been touching it and remixing it for album release. It wasn't Tomlinson. So it would be great to have those albums mixed by, I mean, not saying that Mike Matessino doesn't do a good job, but Chris Malone's the expert.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm gonna cover the one that Ian picked out that I just don't care for. This was the weak one on your list, Ian, in my opinion.
Wait, hang on. Where did you get my list from? Oh, I sent you it, didn't I?
You sent it to me.
Look at it.
I snuck in one night in my
edit that out.
It pains me to say this, but Celebrate Discovery by John Williams. It's on the American Journey CD. It's not making any of my top 10 lists.
Well, I'm keeping it on mine then.
No, that's fine. Why did you pick that one?
I really like it. I just really like it. It's just a really kind of propulsive, fun piece.
I like it. You agree? Okay.
Oh, if I had to pick any like celebratory works of John Williams, Celebrate Discovery is my favorite.
I saw your expression when he mentioned. I thought, well, have you not heard of it? That's this is Erik Woods here. You must have heard.
Yeah.
But I'm so glad you like it. Oh, good.
Oh, I absolutely adore. I heard it for the very first time. I think it was in college, and someone had sent me this low res real audio version of it from a recording off of the television, and I'm like, what is this? And it's not overly difficult. It's like the same theme over and over again, a couple different modulations here and there, and key changes and whatnot. But it just rocks. It just goes straight through, and I all the great Williamses, and it's a wonderful adventure piece. And yeah, I'd been begging for it to come out at some point, and thank God for that American Journey album. I love it, absolutely love it.
It reminds me of Olympic Spirit. It's got that same kind of forward motion in it.
Yes, yeah, his Olympic music all kind of has that same type of that percussion rhythm. Same thing with like a Liberty Fanfare and all that sort of stuff. Really, it's great. I just love the theme. I think the theme is fantastic. Yeah, but it's a good choice.
Thank you.
What don't you like about it, Daniel?
I don't think it's that great. It wouldn't make the top 10. There are better Williams pieces out there. It kind of dragged to me a little bit. Yeah,
What's next on your list?
Anyway,
it's fair. That's fair. It's fair. I mean, it's tough to pick just one great John Williams celebratory piece. I mean, I could put the Atlantic Olympics theme up there as one of the finest things he's ever done. They're all so great. Now, Sound the Bells. I mean, that's magnificent. I love all those pieces. I mean, that's why I didn't pick any, because my whole entire list would have just been John Williams celebratory pieces, fanfares, and things of that sort. So
I do have a number of celebrity pieces from John Williams on my list. But yeah,
we'll throw out another one. Maybe I'll like that one.
Well, I had Sound the Bells on there as well.
Okay.
I didn't know the background to this, and it's a kind of an odd one, isn't it?
It is.
It was written for a marriage in the within the Japanese royal family.
Yeah.
So yeah, but you couldn't have told that by listening to it.
No, and it essentially became the theme for the Boston Pops. So when they were on television doing their television shows, that's how their shows would begin, with Sound the Bells. And I thought, it must be the theme for the Boston Pops. But you're right. But once you look into it, you're like, oh, okay. You can get John Williams to write a piece for your wedding.
Yeah.
Didn't everybody?
Excellent.
What else did I have there? Yeah, I mean, I picked three John Williams, kind of those pieces. I had Liberty Fanfare on there, which again, when I first heard Liberty Fanfare and just Liberty Fanfare, I was thinking, it's something to do with the Liberty Bell. I didn't realize it was the Statue of Liberty and the centennial of the Statue of Liberty.
Yeah.
So that was interesting, and the Jubilee 350.
That's a great piece too.
Fanfare as well.
Yeah.
And again, I had no idea what that meant. I mean, it's one of those pieces you listen to, but you just think, it's called this, and you don't think anything about it. But I didn't realize Boston was that old, 350. So. But, so that's the three kind of John Williams celebration pieces that I had on my list, on my top 5 of 38 pieces.
You also had Cinema Symphony from Andrew Pierce. And
I mean, amongst other, that's the John Williams section. Some John Williams.
I really did enjoy the Celtic Warrior part of that piece.
Well,
that's a different piece, I think.
Yeah,
that's a totally separate piece.
Yeah, it's a totally separate piece. That's what he said. He wrote that for as a theme for a television show. Actually, let me see if I can fire up these notes. It's a commercial work. A year before I composed an orchestral demo theme for a TV news network show reel. This theme had an epic, even Olympian quality to it, perhaps conveying a battle of Celtic warriors. So he expanded it based on this demo he did for television news. And then, I mean, it's quite a contrast to the elegy piece that he wrote just before that on that album that comes right after the symphony. But yeah, the symphony's in 4 movements. It's a massive symphony. So I mean, I just listened to it again this morning. But anyway, before I go into why I like it, what do you have to say about that, Ian?
I like. I mean, the Cinema Symphony, which was in 4 movements, and the Celtic Warrior was another piece at the end. I mean, I love the whole Cinema Symphony thing, but we're going to cover that a bit later on, as you said. But I loved Celtic Warrior, but I didn't know the background, so that's really interesting. But I love that all the pieces that were on that particular album, that Andrew Pearce album. Love them. I need to look into more of his stuff. I must admit, going, you gave us a few to springboard off of, and you go down a well, and I started looking around Andrew Pearce, and I teased something. I said, "Oh, what's that over there?" And you end off way too far away from where you were looking. Then you have to come back. So I can't remember what I'm going to say now. Completely different to Andrew Pearce, Frederick Talgorn.
Mm.
Now, this is one I didn't like. This was, I mean, I've loved looking into Frederick Talgorn. His film work and other stuff is brilliant stuff. And then I looked into Vinum et Sanguinum by Frederick Talgorn, and it's a kind of it's kind of choral, religious kind of thing, and it just didn't float my boat. Have you heard of it, Erik?
No, and I'm now interested in finding it. Well, I love Talgorn's music. Is it on? I'm gonna have to check that out, because I have some of his like production music albums.
Yeah.
And they all sound very filmic, but I don't know about that one, so I will have to check that out after the end of the show. So it's great. Found something new.
Yeah.
But what was it about it that just didn't do it for you?
It's just I'm not into that kind of quasi-religious kind of choral. It was just a bit. I didn't listen to the whole thing. I listened to about 20 minutes, and then I started skipping. I thought, this is the. I'm not going to listen to it, but there's like an hour and 8 minutes of it. So I thought,
right,
no thanks. But but you don't know till you listen to it. So that's what I enjoyed about this. Is I had no idea about how the majority of this music, and then you go into it and you think, oh, look at all the stuff that they have done away from films. It's just incredible. Yeah.
Well, he did do Robot Jocks, Big Al says.
He did.
Well, that made up for that, whatever that was.
I mean, if you want to think of like a kind of a big filmic symphony, we might have talked about this on another show, but Heavy Metal 2000, I think is that it. And I think I've mentioned this before as well. It's as if John Williams, Jerry Goldsmith got together and scored a film. It's just an enormous symphonic masterpiece. I know the CD came out on a promo, I think through Super Collector. Can't remember the name of I think Fort Thaxton sort of ran that little promotional label. They released Krull and various other things before they actually became commercially available. But Talgorn's a wonderful, wonderful talent. Estrico Jeux Olympiques is another fantastic one, very golden age sounding. Has a great action cue called the La Course de Char, which is just your chariot chase music. It's 12 minutes. It's beautiful and wonderful. Talgorn's wonderful. And Robot Jocks, if I'm not mistaken, was expanded by Entrada Records. So check that one out if you can. Oh, good. So I did mention, okay, Heavy Metal 2000. Good.
Yeah.
Glad you remembered.
What else did you have on your list, Ian? You had Scenes of Summer from Lee Holdridge.
Scenes of Summer and Lazarus and His Bride. I loved as well. But again, if you didn't think they were kind of classical pieces, you would have thought they were taken from a soundtrack. It's just that kind of music, which it's the kind of music that I gravitate to, rather than the more kind of experimental, atonal kind of avant-garde stuff. Like Erik said, so some of that music can be challenging, is a polite way of saying it. To me, sometimes when somebody says challenging, I immediately think, well, that's going to sound god awful. That's what challenging sometimes means to me. But sometimes that's maybe not quite right. But
it's kind of like when your parents say, "But you'll learn to like Brussels sprouts." And it's like, no.
Yeah, but the performance as well from the scenes of Summer and Lazarus and His Bride with the London Symphony Orchestra, I think, with Lee Holdridge conducting. Again, this is one of the great things about having access to streaming. You've got access to so much stuff if you can't buy stuff immediately. So this is where I've listened to most of this stuff. But the performance on it was absolutely wonderful. But again, I had no idea that this music existed until Erik mentioned it. So thanks for that.
It's off an album called Holdridge Conducts Holdridge, and it's various different recordings, all from various different years. So it's not just all one album. I think the reason that this album, well, this one I have in particular through Citadel Records. I think it was Tom Null. I could be mistaken. Whoever in charge of Bay City Records, I think they mentioned to Lee Holdridge after hearing the premiere of the violin concerto number 2, and he's like, we got to record this. And so they recorded it, and then they produced this album, which has tracks and pieces from all over Holdridge's concert material. So if you can find the Citadel Records release, Holdridge Conducts Holdridge, it's just his classical work. It's stunning. Yeah, great stuff. 77 minutes long. There's not a bad piece on that album.
I had a quick. Sorry, I was going to say I had a quick scan on eBay for that album, and it is available, but it is very, very expensive.
Mm-hmm. So. Yeah, Citadel doesn't exist anymore. Although, try Buy Soundtracks Records. I mean, it's Fort Daxton, Mark Banning, and they're all buddies with Citadel, and they've all kind of released albums together, and so they have copies of some of these older albums, either in physical form or as downloads, and they're reasonably priced. So that's one place you might want to check for stuff like that. Now, buying it through them might be a bit difficult because sometimes dealing with Ford and dealing with BSX Records can be quite a headache. So, be wary about that. But I think they might have some of this stuff for a reasonable price. I don't know 100%, but I do know that I've seen Ford posting releases from Citadel constantly for the past couple of weeks. So you might want to check that out there.
Okay.
One thing I noticed about Lee Holdridge is he conducted a John Denver album back in the day.
Yeah.
First time I became aware of him was through the score for Splash.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and if there's another album I can recommend, it's the Charles Gerhardt recording of Lee Holdridge material with the London Symphony Orchestra. I think that was like one of the last, if not the last, Gerhardt film composer albums ever. And it's wonderful. The suite from Beastmaster, Jonathan Livingston Seagull. There's an extended suite from a short-lived television series called Wizards and Warriors. East of Eden, the remake. I think there's a suite on there from that. It's just Splash. It's beautiful, beautiful album. And but Lee Holdridge, again, another one of those just kind people. Back in the day when I just started my radio show, I just called him up once and said, I'm going to do a show on your stuff. And so he's like, great, I'll send you some music. And he did. Lovely guy. And he's also a champion of well recorded music too. One of the best recorded albums of his is called Into Thin Air. Interestingly enough, they did a live mix from the recording sessions. And so what you hear on the album is literally what came from the orchestra through the microphones, through the board, and down to a 2 stereo channel mix. And it sounds fantastic. Beautiful, beautiful score. There's really nothing that he wrote that sucks. Like even Secret of Nim Part 2. It's fantastic. Fantastic. He's so good. What's the King Arthur Excalibur? Was it King Arthur? No, something with the oh my god. It was a King Arthur story, but I think I was thinking about the women in King Arthur's life. Oh my god.
King Arthur's bitches. Sorry, I'm sure.
What was that? Oh my god. I could be wrong. Mists of Avalon?
Mists of Avalon? Yeah.
Yes, that's it. Fantastic score. Wow. Wow. Yeah. Excellent. Excellent. I mean, you can't go wrong with a Lee Holdridge score. And there's a lot of stuff that's still not available. We were only made available through promos. Like Call of the Wild. That's excellent. Tuskegee Airmen. Did that finally come out? I know that was on a promo. There was like 5 or 6 volumes of Lee Holdridge promos. He did a science fiction movie, not Star Crash. Oh, and a whole bunch of stuff from him as well for Beauty and the Beast has come out on just promos only. So it's the only way you can get his music. I think even Don Davis's material is tough to find these days from Beauty and the Beast. It's beautiful. Those two, I can imagine Lee Holdridge and Don Davis collaborating on a television series. Fantastic music.
Incredible.
Yeah.
David says that Holdridge is $15 on Buy Soundtrack.
Oh wow.
Now.
Yeah. Get it.
Wow.
Star Command. That's the name of the movie. Star Command by Lee Holdridge. And I think that just came out recently through BSX Records. It was on like volume 4 of the Music of Lee Holdridge, this promo series that came out back in I think the 90s. And through I think it was through Prometheus Records, but they were promos. Anyway.
Well, Eric, you want to dive into your list?
Sure. Well, let's talk about a few pieces that kind of overlap with Ian. Cinema Symphony is probably my number 1. It's my favorite instrumental album of all time. I heard it again this morning, and all I wanted to do was hit repeat once it finished. If you have a composer who really, truly understands the language and history of film music here. There's everything from like film noir to those, sweet 1950s romantic films, to hard-hitting Jerry Goldsmith material, to Nicholas Rocha fanfares and John Williams coloring in the orchestra. And it's just a well thought out piece of music. And I think it took Pierce weeks, maybe even months to even finish the last movement, which I think is about 20 minutes long, and how he was going to develop everything that he had put together in the first 3 movements and concluded within his last movement. And there was so much stuff. And he was notating it all himself. He was putting it through in Logic and doing all the notation there and getting it all ready. And so, but thank God that this piece came up when Mikael Carlson at Movie Score Media was looking to release some of Andrew Pierce's stuff. And Pierce had mentioned that he was working on the symphony, and it was recorded with the RSNO. Jose Cerubier was conducting, and when Mikael Carlson first heard it, he's like, this is what would happen if Jerry Goldsmith had wrote a symphony. and so he had to release it, and so he did. And it's a film score without a film, and you just close your eyes and just let it absorb you and take you wherever the music's going to take you in your mind. It's stunning. The recording is amazing. I mean, the Royal Scottish National Orchestra has always sounded good, but man, this sounds fantastic. And again, it's just disappointing that when you hear music of this caliber, that this composer still hasn't had the shot that he deserves. So, Cinema Symphony, Movie Score Media, pretty sure it's still available. If it's not in your collection, trust me, you want to get it now. You will not be disappointed. It's rousing, it's heartfelt, deeply emotional. You can tell when a composer puts everything in, and Pierce put everything into this piece.
I wrote. I was going to write notes for all the things, but I just got carried away listening to it. And just for the kind of the first movement of the symphony, I just wrote down action music for large-scale adventure film.
Yeah,
that's you say just closing your eyes and just let it wash over you. That's what I was seeing while I was listening to that first movement. It was just wow.
Yeah. And it's something you don't just put on and do something else. It really you need to sit there, press play, and listen to it through speakers. Just let it envelop you. It's incredible. It's a wonderful experience. And when I first heard it, I was like, yeah, this is one of the best things I've ever heard. And it still remains. Like, if I'm ever reaching for something and I'm like, I don't know what to play, Cinema Symphony. Always love it.
Yeah.
Then I'm going back to that Christus Apollo album, and the reason I'm doing that is because I want to touch upon music for orchestra. And there's nothing wrong with Fireworks. I love it. Very rousing, traditional kind of Jerry Goldsmith piece. But there's just, you were mentioning earlier, when you find out what the piece of music is about, your initial response to that music changes, and then you finally understand why it was written that way, and then you kind of experience it in a whole new way, and then you might only play it when you're sort of feeling the way that the composer was feeling at that time. And so when it comes down to, like, just having a bad day and you just want, and you're just kind of feeling like everything's just absolute garbage. And sometimes you want to go for a pick-me-up, but sometimes you just want something that's just kind of angry and mean and just filled with sorrow. And this is that piece. And what's so I mean, by the way, it's written with the 12-tone system, which is quite difficult to listen to for some, because I think the rules within serialism is that you have these 12 tones, and through the sequence of writing, when you play this one note, you play another note, but you can't play that note again until all 12 notes have been played. And then you can go back and then play another sequence of these notes. So it almost seems very random, but it's very liberating for a composer who is feeling a certain way to write in this style. So, there's Taking of the Pelham 1, 2, 3, written in the 12-tone serial composing style, and there's many others. But the thing about this piece of music, I know this is long-witted, it was written in the 1970s, and Leonard Slatkin asked Goldsmith to write a piece for the St. Louis Symphony. But, Goldsmith really, really wanted to write this, but he was just going through one of the worst years of his life. He was going through a divorce, and on top of that, his mom was seriously ill with cancer. So he took all of that turmoil and threw it into this piece of music. And it is it feels like film music. I mean, the thing is with Goldsmith always sounds like Goldsmith. It doesn't matter what type of style he's writing in or what he's doing. You can always tell it's Goldsmith. And this one, you can just feel him letting all of his anger out, that emotion out into this piece of music. And I think it's mostly written for strings and percussion. But this one, for it being such a personal work for Jerry Goldsmith, that's the one I kind of lean towards. But it's nice to kind of have that contrast on that album. You go from this hard-hitting, mean, angry piece to fireworks at the end, and then you have that more religious kind of Christus Apollo in the middle. So it's an interesting album, but I love Music for Orchestra, and if you haven't heard it, go and check it out. It's not very long. I think it's only like 8 minutes long, but it's a wonderful piece of music.
Yeah, I must admit, I find Music for Orchestra. I need to probably listen to it again. It's been a few years since I've actually listened to it, but I found it very jarring.
Mm-hmm.
It is, as you say, a challenging listen, but and I kind of knew some of the backstory to his situation while he was writing it, but I need to listen to it again. It's just that my memory of it is a very kind of awkward is not the right word, but I think jarring is the best way for me to describe it. It was a hard listen.
Well, and it is. I think that, again, the personal story helps me with my listen of it, and you can almost picture Jerry at that time, just the frustration in his life, and maybe he's just banging his desk and throwing things and screaming at the top of his lungs, and you can almost hear all that musically in this piece. And that's what I find so fascinating about it, is that you almost can hear his voice, like literally, or the actions, or his just the way he's expressing himself. It's all in that music. It's really fascinating, and I love those personal works from composers in their classical music. Because again, there's no limit in time, and so he could just write until he's finished. And I think he had to. I think he was just so perfect for him to get everything out that he needed to in that package. So, but I like that style of Goldsmith music as well. It's kind of up my alley.
It's kind of weird. If that had been a score piece, if that had been taken from a film for whatever kind of scene, you listen to it and it conjures up scenes of violence, scenes of distress, scenes of just whatever. Mm-hmm. If I had pictured, if it was taken from a film, I would probably be more accepting of it as a piece of music. As I listen to bits of score music that some people would say to me, "Oh, that's just noise. That's just like orchestra tuning up." So no, this is for this kind of thing, and this happens, and music's kind of following that. It's just the fact that I don't have something to tether that music to. It is a challenging listen, so I need to listen to it again and reassess.
Yeah, and I mean, and there's a reason, and spoilers. There's no John Williams on my list, and when you're talking about challenging listens, Williams is the most challenging for me when it comes down to film composers moving over to classical, and I have a real hard time with it. I understand what he's doing and why he's writing the way that he writes. It just doesn't work for me at all, but we can talk about that later if you want. But yeah, it's I like challenging, but I also need the piece of music to actually move and at least say something. And I don't find that with Williams. I find Williams, and this is not really a criticism, because I understand what he's doing. I think he's just stretching his performer and the instrument they're playing on to the fullest degree. And he's not worried about melody or certain types of structure. He's just like, how can I explore this instrument that I probably haven't done before? And I think that even if Williams had done like symphonies or concertos that sounded like his film work, that probably would be a waste of his time. And I think that with Williams, he's going and trying more challenging material because he doesn't get that opportunity. He really is a more modernist composer, just kind of hidden underneath this melodic side that we see of him. Because I think some of the best experiences that he had, based on what I've read, is that he gets super excited over like serialism or minimalism, stuff like Images, stuff like the haunting, almost horror music from Close Encounters, the minimalism through AI. I think that excites him more, exploring 20th century concert classical music rather than that romantic era, which he's again very good at. So that's where I think his classical music goes, and that's where I check out with him. And again, I love Images, I love Close Encounters, I love AI, but because that certain style is only in those scores for a little bit, and then you go into the more melodic side of John Williams. Whereas, if you had, name one of his classical works, it's really tough for me to kind of get through it. Like the violin concerto that he wrote for Sophie Mutter, I can't get through it. I can't. I understand what he's doing, but I just can't. So anyway,
I was there for the world premiere of that, and I was like, "Can we hurry up?" Is there an intermission coming up sometime soon, please?
That's quite funny.
I'm like, come on. Yeah, but no,
I've seen John Williams in interviews, and he's saying that when it comes to his own personal taste and his own personal style, it's more his concert work. The stuff, the more atonal kind of challenging stuff. That's more what he enjoys. That's more his style.
Yeah,
it's just
I get that sense as well.
The film work demands a different approach, just because of what it is. So I think, as you say, he can do the melodic stuff that we all love for the films, but he can stretch his musical muscles doing these concert pieces and these concertos or symphonies or whatever it is that he needs to do to get his own personal style out there.
Yeah, because you rarely hear like a sing-song long line melody in his classical material that is like his film scores. And again, I think for John Williams, that would just be a waste of time because he's done that hundreds of times in his film music. So to explore different types of music, I'm just actually shocked at this point of his life that he hasn't gone and done another jazz album. That's what surprises me the most. But I think then, though, that this type of avant-garde material that he's writing kind of has its roots within jazz. Again, jazz very experimental at times, and all over the place. And you can start with one little idea and you can just keep playing for 15 minutes based on that one little idea. A lot of improv. And I think that's what his music almost feels like. Although it's written down, I feel like his music sounds more improvised by the performer. And I think maybe he even allows the performer to explore the instrument that they're playing in that way. He'll ground that performer with a little melody or motif here, but it almost seems like that it's kind of an improvised piece. And it's fascinating, but it's just not for me when I think of overall musical enjoyment.
I've got a devil's advocate thought here, because you said that the symphonic writing is so wildly different from the film writing. He did a symphony, I think early 80s. It was played one time. There's no recording of it. It got panned. It's never been played again. It's never even been spoken of, I don't think, by him or anyone else since then. It's just like forgotten. What if that symphony was more like his film work and the critics came out? But I think at that point in time, they're going to come out regardless and just pan it. I mean, he's a film composer stepping in the classical world. You know, not going to happen. People aren't going to appreciate it. And what if he took that experience and he's like, well, I want to be respected as a, respectable composer. And he took this other path, consciously trying to do something so different from his film work, trying to gain respect in those concert halls.
It's entirely possible. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. I just
That'd be a good interview question to ask him, wouldn't it?
yes, it would. That question. I would be like, yes, please, instead of what we got on Classic FM. But I just think he's challenging himself in the classical world more so than what he can in the film world. Again, nobody's telling him what to write when it comes down to classical music. I mean, if he, for instance, one of the cello pieces that he wrote is based off of, I think, a 4 or 5 note little ditty that came out of 7 Years in Tibet. It wasn't necessarily the main theme, but there's a little hint of a melody in there that he's like, I like that, and now I want to explore it out in a concert work for Yo-Yo Ma. And I think that's a neat idea. And I wish kind of more composers would do that. Like, Erik Korngold, and none of his stuff is on my list, although he writes some dazzling classical music, but he would take ideas from his film scores and then he would massage them into the classical music that he was writing at the same time or afterwards. And I find that fascinating. I think Ray Vaughan Williams did the same thing with Scott of the Antarctic. He took that film score and took it into the classical world, which I thought was fantastic. Alexander Nevsky is the same thing. The cantata for Alexander Nevsky is amazing, and that's a standard classical work, although it's a film score, one of the best film scores of all time. And that's what I would love to have happen. Is I would love to have more film composers actually taking their film work and working it into the classical music, much like Elliot Goldenthal does. He's presented Michael Collins in concert. He's adapted portions of Sphere and I think Final Fantasy into one of his symphonies. That's fascinating to me. I love that be able to bring that film music, and you might not necessarily have to tell people it's film music. That's what I would love. I would love if a composer took their film music and then said, this is the concerto for A minor, blah, 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 blah. But it's like, I don't know, Batman. You know what I mean? That would be great. I would love that. But then on the flip side, I love that Danny Elfman writes his own concert material. And again, it's not on my list, but it's Serenata Schizophrenia is incredible. I think he did a piano concerto. It was great. I mean, his writing, he's an incredible writer. He never gets enough credit for being a great symphonic writer, because everybody thinks that Shirley Walker and Steve Bartek wrote all of his material back in the 80s and 90s, and even if that's true, still Danny Elfman's an incredible composer, and he's proven that after all these years. So but yeah, I would love for that to happen. And I'm not sure how we got on this tangent here, but I think it was just based on Williams. Oh yeah, Williams grabbing ideas from his film scores and throwing it in there. But yeah, I mean, do you like Williams's classical material?
Me, I don't. I'm not a huge fan of it. I've probably listened to them once or twice, but it is, as you say, it's too far away from what I was expecting it to be. I was thinking, it's going to be the John Williams that I know from the film world, just let loose and just free to be even more expansive and more John Williams. If you but it's not. It's just not to my taste. So, which is fine. If you don't like it, you don't have to listen to it. But
true.
Yeah.
I think if there's one piece that I liked, and this is one of the earlier ones that I heard, was his bassoon music for 5 Sacred Trees. Again, it's very modernist, but I think writing for an odd woodwind instrument is quite fascinating. And then, again, reading on, what the piece is about, whatnot, and the sounds and the ideas seem to come together. So yeah, sometimes it works. Other times, most of the time it's not for me. I know that he did like a horn concerto at some point, and it was quite beautiful, and I think that was like a live recording with the Detroit Symphony. But yeah, for the most part, nah, I'd rather not. So what about you, Daniel? What do you think of John Williams's classical material?
I can take it or leave it. I'll buy it just because I'm a completist in that way. And, I have to have it all, but I don't typically go back to it. There's certain pieces, Highwood's Ghost, which is on my list. I enjoy that piece.
But I just listened to that today too, and it was actually very good. But it's short.
It is short. Yeah. Everything he's done for my least favorite German, I don't care for.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's that's fair. I mean, I envy anybody who can listen to these pieces and pick out the melodies and pick out the little things that Williams is doing and appreciate it for what it is. I wish I could, but I unfortunately can't.
And like in the same vein, I don't like Images like at all. I didn't care for Earthquake at all. Poseidon Adventure, I'm like, not really. Towering Inferno's got a good main theme, but the rest of it I'm kind of indifferent to. So I don't like everything John Williams does. So people don't think that. But
yeah, and I don't either. Even though he's my favorite. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's some stuff I'll never. A lot of his like 60s stuff I rarely go back to. So, and I probably should. I'm sure there's some. I mean, there is some great music in there, but I mean, as a whole, probably not. Yeah, the other one that kind of overlaps with Ian's list is Lee Holdridge's violin concerto. That's off that Holdridge Conducts Holdridge. That's my favorite, and I find that again is probably one of his more personal albums. I know he wrote it for a very specific performer. I'm just going to look at the notes to make sure I get these names right. So he was approached in 1977 to write music for the American Youth Symphony. Glenn Dicterow was the concertmaster of the LA Philharmonic and played on many of Holdridge's studio orchestra recordings. And Holdridge is actually a violinist himself, and so he decided to write this concerto for his friend and write for this youth orchestra. And I mean, he had written stuff for violin and orchestra before, but it was a little more unconventional. But he wanted to do a proper violin concerto in 3 parts, and the amount of passion that comes through. Again, you can just feel how personal this is. And I think that's also one thing that's really interesting when composers are writing for specific players, besides whether you like those players or not. I mean, I understand why John Williams writes for Sophie Mutter. He likes the way she performs and whatnot, and he challenges her to, with every aspect of her violin, to play his music, and so and Williams gets much joy out of that. So I can see just by listening to this violin concerto, which is just absolutely lovely. And the thing is, violins can get really grating after a while, but it's either the recording, the performance, the way the orchestra is mixed in. It's a beautiful, beautiful piece, and one that I return to quite often. And so, yeah, Holdridge Conducts Holdridge. I highly recommend that, particularly for the violin concerto. So, again, written, in the 70s. A lot of this stuff I think comes from the 70s and 80s from Holdridge, you know, in a time when he was writing a lot of classical music. So it's a very fascinating album. And again, it sounds very filmic. It definitely has a structure to it, a story, and so that's why I really, really like it. Did you guys get a chance to listen to it? Oh, I know you have, Ian.
Yeah, I've listened to it through. I mean, I liked everything that was on that particular album. You were talking about Lee Holdridge in East of Eden on a different the Charles Gerhard recording. Well, again, I mean, I've
yes. Oh, they've actually called it East of Eden. That's interesting.
It's motion picture. It's just London Symphony Orchestra, Charles Gerhard and Lee Holdridge. But yeah, until I can actually find a hard copy of it, it's available to stream.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah,
a wonderful album.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Did you get a chance to listen to this, Daniel?
Not that one.
No. Get on it. I have like one more slot? No, two more. Okay, let's get into the most difficult one. Fire, Water, Paper, a Vietnam Oratorio by Elliot Goldenthal.
I just want to say real fast, I was most impressed with his concert work.
Isn't it good?
While researching this show, because you had mentioned Othello, and I'm like, well, I'll have to listen to that. And I was like, it sounds like Goldenthal, only I think it's better because it's not tied to a movie.
Yeah. I mean, Goldenthal is definitely, I think, a concert composer first, and then film composer next. I think he belongs in the concert hall. He also belongs writing film music, because I think his film music is absolutely dazzling, and his voice is sorely missed in film music today. But Fire, Water, Paper, again, is one that needs context, because it is a deeply dramatic, emotional piece, and it hits hard.
It was the 20th anniversary of the ending of the Vietnam War.
Right. And what's so unique about it, one, it took 1.5 years for Goldenthal to put together, and he was writing music right up to its premiere. And I think he's still changed it here and there since it premiered. But yeah, he was still writing music up until that point. I don't think that the finale was done. There's just so many ideas, and he had to try to condense them, and he couldn't. And so, but what's interesting about this is that he didn't take a political stance. He didn't pick one side or the other. Point being is that if, let's say, one had experienced the Vietnam War, listening to this, you could feel almost the same emotion as, let's say, you know, when the Vietnam people who experienced it, and then let's say an American soldier, and you can come at it at many different ways. And I was watching interviews about the premiere of the piece, and listening to soldiers talk about it, and he's like, yeah, definitely. I mean, you can hear the sorrow in the piece and how I felt, and then you can almost hear the violence of the the guns rattling off and the helicopters and all that type of excitement. But then, of course, it just mellows out, and you can just see all the death and destruction and whatnot. So that person sees it from one point of view, but then someone else who experienced the war from the other side will experience it from a different point of view, but might have those same reactions, where it's, the more violent pieces or sections in this piece come off as the actual war, but then the rest of it is the aftermath and what was left behind. But another thing is that Goldenthal spent so much time researching this and reading as much material as possible, especially poetry, that he inserted the lines that were most profound to him into this piece, which is why it's an oratorio. And I'm usually turned off by opera. I mean, this isn't an opera. I mean, the main difference is, opera, very theatrical. It's it's a story on stage and whatever, but oratory, you just have people standing there but singing the lyrics, but in a very operatic fashion. And so I thought that's what's going to turn me off of this piece, no doubt. But then once you read the lyrics, hear the lyrics, how they are harmonized, it is some of the most haunting stuff you will ever hear. There's even words from, and I'm going to get this wrong, one of the monks, Tibetan monks, she doused herself in gasoline and put herself on fire at one point, but she had written some poetry beforehand, and those words are in the piece. And so, I mean, Ian has mentioned many times on this show that context is important with film music, but I think context is so important with classical music. I mean, you can go and enjoy it as music, which is fair, but once you understand the story behind it, then you understand what the composer is going through in the story that he wants to tell, or what was going through his or her mind while they were writing it. And you can tell that this affected Goldenthal deeply. And that's why he took so much time to do it. I mean, they almost fired him from the job because he wasn't getting stuff done fast enough. But it
Good
is
that he wasn't fired.
Yeah. And it's just a hard hitting, at times violent piece, at times really, really quiet, with kind of odd voicing, odd harmonics, but it's distinctly Goldenthal. And it plays through. Again, it's the one where you just you don't throw it in the background. You really need to sit there and pay attention, and it'll blow you away. I mean, there's some of the writing, especially the scherzo material, it's phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal. But even then, when the big choral music comes in, just hits you hard. It's really an emotional experience. So highly recommend that. Did you guys give it a go?
Yeah,
it's one of the Elliot Goldenthals that I didn't actually listen to. I've got it lined up to listen to, but it's interesting that you said context again with this. Maybe that's one of the reasons why listening to these kind of non-film music ones, I'm not having any context. I'm not doing the research I should do to discover why it was written, what it's written about. Maybe if I had that information, there'd be more of a connection with the music that I'm listening to, and I wouldn't be so put off by it. Maybe.
Yeah, and I mean, I could be wrong about the whole monk thing. I know it was I know somebody. I just don't know their nationality or who they were. It was somebody important, and I can't remember the name, so I apologize if I said something incorrect. But I knew that they lit themselves on fire as a demonstration. So, but I want to correct that if I can at some point. And I'm not finding a lot of information on it. Darn it. Anyway, if anybody does, please correct me, because I'm pretty sure I got that wrong. But I know that was one of the more profoundly moving sections when you know whose voice it is. So
the CD is very affordable on eBay as well. For those of you who do not have it, I would recommend purchasing it.
Yeah, absolutely. See, I thought it was out of print, but I guess it's not. Darn it, I wish I could find that name. I did have it written here somewhere. Well, anyway, just go look at it. There's a video about the making of it on Elliot Goldenthal's own page, website, and it's fascinating. It's like 7 minutes long, and it's really great. So, lastly, probably the simplest piece on the bunch, but one that if I find difficulty finding something to listen to, I just kind of put this on and it just kind of washes over me and makes me feel great. Unlike, listening to music for orchestra, which is just like, you're down in the dumps. It's perfect way to tell that story. But Pas de Deux by James Horner. Just I'm a sucker for for like these pastoral pieces. And someone had mentioned that the music almost flows like waves over the sand. And that's a perfect way of describing it. It's a double string concerto. It's violin and cello, and it's a very typical James Horner piece, but given more time and length to develop certain ideas, and there are familiar phrases in the piece. I mean, it essentially ends the way that The Rocketeer and Star Trek II, Wrath of Khan ends, but it ends in a interesting violin cello string way. And so, but it just when it finishes, I'm like, I can't believe it's over. And it was written for those two, brother and sister, Marie and Håkan Samuelson. And I think the Liverpool Philharmonic Orchestra commissioned it.
Yeah.
And sadly, this was released only weeks after James Horner passed away. So maybe that's why it hit me harder than it probably would have if he was alive. But I listened to it and it just feels free flowing. That's it. And it's just beautiful. And there's this, if you have it, play the first movement, and then about just before the 3-minute mark, there's this absolutely gorgeous sweeping string theme that pops up where the soloists dip out and then the orchestra takes over, and only James Horner can write that way. No one else. And again, it just kind of, it just washes over you. It feels like it feels like a hug. And then you get kind of the more up-tempo final movement, which is just a lot of fun. And yeah, I highly recommend that piece. It was just so great to hear James Horner back writing classical music again. And I think that if he was still alive to this day, that's kind of where he was heading towards, or being able to explore that part of his life that was taken away from him back in the early or late 1970s, when Spectral Shimmers was just performed once, and that was it, and nobody liked it, and he was basically cast out of the concert world. But then he wrote Pas de Deux, he wrote Collage, Forest Passage. I don't know when that was written, but that was fascinating to see played during that James Horner concert. You're like, what is this? It's like the best of James Horner. And so it would have been great to see him explore classical music. And it's just sad that was kind of ripped away from him and us. But Pas de Deux is there. And you can feel the passion. The passion in the music, the writing. It just seems so very freeing for James Horner. And it's beautiful.
Forest Passage was actually on my list, and it was commissioned by the Cleveland Orchestra in 2000 for the Cuyahoga Valley National Recreational Area.
Did I? Oh, see, I mentioned Violin Concerto. I'm gonna sneak one more in here because I think violin was supposed to be 6, and I have this other one here at 5. So I'm gonna sneak one more in here. Concerto for Saxophone and Orchestra by Michael Kamen. Again, a free-flowing piece that I think Kamen could compose with his eyes shut, written for David Sanborn, who performed on the 4 Lethal Weapon scores. And it's just it could almost seem rather silly to do a sax concerto and try not to have it sound like Kenny G. And could you think about it? You're like, oh man. But what I loved about Kamen was that he did 2 concertos based on non-traditional orchestral instruments, and that being the saxophone and the guitar. Now, the guitar concerto is just something else. That thing just absolutely rocks, and it was written for Eric Clapton. But the sax concerto just seems so effortless, especially the last movement. There's 5 minutes of just big orchestral writing, all kind of like in a whirlwind around this one main theme that constantly is played on the sax, and it's a gorgeous piece. And if you can find it, I highly recommend that you do. And I think that there's a DVD of the performance as well. Yeah.
Yep.
Gorgeous album.
Yeah.
And but that's what I loved about Michael Kamen. And I wish he'd written more unconventional concert works. I mean, I know there's New Moon for the Old Moon's Arms, which was a Millennium Symphony that he wrote. It's a really crappy recording with the National Symphony. I'm not sure whether it was a live recording, but there's just something wrong with it, and I hope somebody records that new at some point. And then I think that Kamen even adapted the Mr. Holland's opus into American Symphony and expanded that as well. And that's a really lovely piece of music. But Concerto for Saxophone and Orchestra, you really haven't heard anything like it before. And it's such the recording so crystal clear and smooth. It's beautiful. Beautiful stuff. So those are my choices. I have a whole pile more. But yeah.
You do?
That's my time. I rest my case.
I had another Elliot Goldenthal one on there as well, Symphony in G sharp. It's just 2 movements. It's not a particularly long symphony.
I think that's the Sphere Final Fantasy one.
Is it?
I think so. I could be wrong about Final Fantasy, but I know there's a ton of Sphere in that one. I'm pretty sure that's it. Or it's another one.
Do you know what? You having said that, kind of. I mean, I liked it, and I wrote a very brief note here saying, bordering on challenging, but very film-like.
Yes.
And the first movement is quite quiet, and there's something menacing and brooding, and there's something, and it kind of breaks loose in the second movement. But you saying that, I think, well, okay, that makes sense. But yeah, again, just it sounds like a piece of music that Elliot Goldenthal would have composed for film, and if that's the case, it probably was, and just kind of expanded into a concert hall setting.
Yeah.
But
and I wish I
could. Yeah, but I really liked it.
I wish I could confirm the use of Sphere. I know that. I mean, you can hear it. But again, there's not a lot of information on it. But when I heard it, I was like, yeah, there's spheres in there for sure. What a great score of his. So, yeah.
David's got a question for you, Eric, real quick.
Fire. What is it?
Thoughts on the Indy 5Q.
Well, I'll tell you right now, I can't sing it. I can't hum it. I've listened to it about 2 or 3 times. It never really stuck with me, but I appreciate the composition and the style, the kind of old-fashioned femme fatale style that it was written in. And what the heck? Where'd my camera go? Why? Here. We're back. Weird. Yeah, so that's all I can really say right now. And but I'm well, I mean, what was it? Now she's Brody's niece? Is that the rumor? That's who she is?
I don't know. I'm not listening too much to rumors at the moment.
I think even Frank Marshall said that by accident on Twitter.
Oh. Okay then.
He just had his annual birthday party last week. I should have crashed it. He has it the same place every year.
Yeah, he took to Twitter and he said, what the heck did he say? He said something like, Indy Ford's goddaughter. Yeah, something like that. So, but I mean, look, I'm interested in. I'm actually really interested in this now, and I mean, I'm pretty sure we all. I'm not going to say anything. Forget it. I kind of have an idea where I think that this film is going, and I'm intrigued, very, very intrigued, because if you can introduce aliens into the Indy franchise, then you can get away with whatever you're going to do with Indy 5. That's for sure. I'm fascinated by what they're going to do. I really am.
I heard Salah's back.
He is. Yes. So, and like, where's that trailer? Come on. Let's go.
We'll get it. We'll get it.
I just don't understand. It's like, oh, it showed at D23. It's like, oh, great. How come the rest of us can't see it? But yeah, I'm excited, which I shouldn't be, but I am, and I wasn't once this was announced, but now I get an idea of kind of where this movie might be going. I'm very interested in it, but it just seems like a rip-roaring, globe-trotting adventure. But that's just going to have a wicked sci-fi element to it, which I'm really looking forward to. So, yeah.
It doesn't matter how outlandish the plot is, so long as they do it well, I don't mind.
Exactly, and that's where I'm in with that as well. I mean, if you can believe someone getting their heart pulled out of their chest and surviving, then you can believe anything that happens.
Whoa! You're saying that can't happen?
Well,
no. So, so Daniel, my question is: so, out of all of these things that we sent your way, I mean, do you have a favorite? Or, I mean, it's just like, wow, I can't believe that existed, and thank goodness it does.
I feel like you've opened up a lot more avenues for me to spend my money. Bastard. The Elliot Goldenthal really, I think that was the most pleasant surprise for me. I'm kind of mixed on his film work, but I greatly enjoyed Othello and I want to say Paper, Water, Scissors, but I don't think that's the appropriate title.
Lizard Spot.
Yeah. Not to make light of the topic of the piece either, but Fire, Water, Paper. Okay, yeah. I was very impressed with his work, and I do enjoy the ballet. So if Othello, it toured in 97, 2002, and 2008. If it ever tours again, I will make it a point to go see it.
I think he's also updated it I think he's updated the piece, but because there's the Othello Symphony. Anyway.
Oh, we've lost Daniel now.
Oh,
I'm here. I got to respond to a text message about a ride tonight. I'm sorry.
All right.
Yeah. Okay. Well, how's about? I'll give some honorable mentions here. Ones that I wanted to talk about. Have you heard The Tempest, the tone poem by Cliff Idleman?
I did some research on it, but I didn't get to listen to it. It sounded interesting. And there's a Goldsmith Odyssey episode where they actually interviewed Cliff Idleman about it.
Yeah. He's got another classical work that's coming out soon, but The Tempest is beautiful. I think it's about 16 minutes long, and there's a whole album that's just based off Shakespeare works on Perez Sarabande Records, and so this is the last track on that album, and it's lovely. So there's Battle for Atlantis by Kevin Casca, and I think that we brought that up on the show before. If you're a fan of Revenge of the Sith, Attack of the Clones, and Prisoner of Azkaban, and it's like a 15-minute piece of action music. All of that's in that piece. Herman's Moby Dick, which is excellent. I think we talked about, we might have, or this probably was on another episode, but Impressions of America by Patrick Doyle. Very simple piece, but a very personal piece for Patrick Doyle. And I think it's written for children's orchestras or bands. So, but it's just Patrick Doyle's impressions of America when he came here to visit, and he wrote it down in musical form, and it's a lovely little album. Carl Davis, I think, is an incredibly gifted composer. Doesn't get talked about a lot, but just writes one stunning score after another. And so he did the ballet Aladdin. That's magnificent. Oh, and then if you want to talk about the creme de la creme of film composers writing for the concert hall, after the Haiti disaster, 25 film composers came together and wrote a piece dedicated to that disaster called Symphony of Hope. And it's like, okay, 25 composers. How is this gonna work? And I think there was like a dedicated group of orchestrators that took all of this material and merged them together. And it surprisingly works.
So the heroes of that one are the actual orchestrators rather than the composers.
Yeah. And it was like Christopher Lennertz came with the idea and grabbed all these composers to write sections. And I mean, you could tell who's writing what, but it doesn't sound jarring. And yeah, it's a quite a unique piece. And there was an original, there was a website for it when it came out, but I can't find it now. I just wanted to give you kind of the names of who was writing for this. And then I think they did another one. But anyway.
I had another Jerry Goldsmith piece on my list as well, and it's an early piece that he did in 1957, The Thunder of Imperial Names. Have you heard that one?
No, that's new to me.
Okay, well, I can't find. I had it on a recording somewhere. I can't find it anywhere. So I'm gonna have to try and dig that out. It's only a short piece. It's only like, I think it's maybe 5 minutes, 6 minutes long.
Okay.
It was based on a text. There's spoken word in it, and it's the recording I had was some American military band doing it. It's a very kind of martial piece.
Okay.
In between this text, I can't even know what the text was about. But I just remember the name of it, The Thunder of Imperial Names. But it was interesting because it was 1957 as well. So
yeah,
very, very early.
So that's like his radio days, right? 57.
Yeah, possibly. Yeah.
Yeah. So Symphony of Hope. Okay. Nathan Barr, Tyler Bates, Jeff Beal, Chris Beck, Bruce Broughton, George Clinton, Elis Morel, Don Davis, John Debney, Randy Edelman, Andrew Gross, David Grusin, Marvin Hamlish, David Kittay, Christopher Lennertz, Deborah Laurie, Elizabeth Scott, Pete Seibert, Theodore Shapiro, Edward Shearmer, John Swihart, Brian Tyler, Michael Windmacher, Tim Wind, and Christopher Young.
Wow.
It's a 5-movement symphony. And it's great. It really is. And then I'm trying to think of, I think that was it for my honorable mentions. But there's so many. Like, I didn't even mention Miklos Roche's classical material. Jeez, that stuff is amazing. So there's so much out there.
Yeah.
There's
Like,
a lot out there.
Yeah. So what about your picks?
Well, we've kind of covered most of them, except I
Really?
think for Bernard Herrmann's Courier and Ives, written 1935, it was originally conceived as a ballet,
Oh wow.
but then he kind of tweaked it a little bit later. But it's just, to me, it sounded like Aaron Copland, but it's definitely Bernard Herrmann. It's got great dance rhythms to it. It's a really cool piece.
Excellent.
I went looking for some Bernard Herrmann like concert work CDs. I'm like, oh my lord. They can get kind of pricey.
Really?
Yes. Yeah, like $200, $300 pricey.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. All right.
So if you find any at the thrift store, look them up.
Anything else?
We talked about Forest Passage and Highwood's Ghost. We kind of covered mine by covering y'all's. Oh, Aaron Copland. We didn't talk about Aaron Copland. Quiet City was originally incidental music written for the play The Quiet Man by Shaw Irwin, and Copland later reworked it in the piece that we know today. I first heard it on a John Williams Boston Pops album. It's got this pretty horn. It's just a beautiful, beautiful piece. And the play is actually about a Jewish man who decides to not be Jewish anymore, and he gets married, but he still longs for his Jewish heritage. And I'm like, I didn't get that at all from listening to this, but I'll take your word for it. I just kind of get like, it's been a long night. You get home in your skyscraper apartment, you sit by the window and you drink a Coca-Cola and you stare out over the city at night. That was my take on it. But what do I know?
Now,
but
would you call Aaron Copland a film composer or a classical composer that did films?
Well, you tricked me with your logic.
I mean, because Copland would win if that was the case, if he was the film composer that dabbled in concert music.
Yeah. I think Copland was a musician trying to make a living, and he took the jobs that were available.
All right.
Okay, because by that rationale, what about Shostakovich and Prokofiev?
Right. Right.
Because
those are concert people dabbling in film work. Like Corgliano, 4 scores. He's a concert guy. I mean, I don't think you'd necessarily call him a film composer, but he was a great film composer. So I wish he'd wrote more, but Edge of Darkness basically, he nixed that. It's like, forget it. I'm not going to deal with this crap anymore. I'll do my own stuff. So, but he left us with 4 magnificent scores. And one won an Academy Award. The other one, Altered States, was an Academy Award nominee. Revolution won the Razzie Award for worst score, or was nominated. But it's a magnificent score. The film's garbage. The score's magnificent, and then Edge of Darkness, of course, rejected, but it's beautiful. So, but I wouldn't say he's the film composer writing concert music.
Yeah.
I just wanted Copland on the list, so.
I mean, like, Copland, oh God, yeah. Copland's just extraordinary. Doesn't matter what he was doing, just always wrote great stuff. So, but, Christopher Gordon has written some classical material. He wrote something that expanded on his music for, Master and Commander, but a lot of this stuff is like really difficult to find. Night is What Remains. That's the piece. He's also done a bass trombone in orchestra piece, and then he wrote a kind of shorter piece in 4 parts called Circa. I was able to find these on his website before he took down a lot of his samples. But yeah.
Malcolm Arnold, anybody?
Yeah, Malcolm Arnold is like he's man, to tell you how many times I've listened to his stuff. I have his stuff, but I mean beyond like one hand. I mean over the years, just not somebody that I gravitate towards.
Now I'm curious to go look him up. So thank you, Victor. I will be looking him up later today. And David says this has been an extremely insightful topic. And, you know, I feel like every time I do one of these with these fine gentlemen, I'm just like, I'm writing down stuff to go look up, and it just leads to more stuff. And it's like dipping your toe in the water of the ocean. And it's never ending, but it's always enjoyable.
Yeah, that's what's so great about, I mean, that's what's so great about, you know, film composers exploring the concert world, because it's like getting, you know, it's brand new scores from them, but you know, they're written in their own voice, and they're scoring the film that's in their head and not somebody else's idea. So, I mean, there's Vangelis wrote a concert piece to celebrate the NASA mission in 2001, the Mars Odyssey. But and I remember the concert itself. I think it was outdoors, and he's surrounded by all of his synthesizers. But he calls it a choral symphony, and so it's just it's the thing that Vangelis does really well, right? You know, when he introduces chorus with his synths, there's really nothing like it. I mean, 1492 Conquest of Paradise is just wonderful when you have live voices and his synthesizers. So I think, yeah, he premiered it in Athens. And there is a release of it, and it's really, really good. And so, but it's just like, there's a part of Vangelis where, I mean, again, is he a film composer, or is he, you know, this electronic musician who just happened to dabble in film composing?
I think it's the musician who dabbles in films. I think
Right.
it's that way around rather than the other way.
So he's kind of on the fence, but
Yeah.
But when you're talking about, yeah, but I mean, I think most of us first, well, I'm going to assume heard him, you know, it's Chariots of Fire and Blade Runner, and then probably would dabbled onto his other albums from there. Well, at least that's how I did it. So,
what about Will Jet's Killar, who did Dracula and The Ninth Gate? And he did a phenomenal piece, Exodus.
Mm-hmm.
Listen to that.
Yeah, he's again. I think he's. I would say he's more classical world that came to film music and just did film music so well. But he wrote a lot of influential music. You're right. I mean, I love. What's the album called? It's all in like Polish. Angelus, Exodus, and Krzani.
Yeah.
Like, what is interesting about Exodus? Isn't Exodus like 25-minute piece of music?
Yeah, it's long.
But that has one bit of choral, and it's right at the end. Right? Don't they just yell something at the end, and it's like, what the heck is that? But they're nowhere to be found in the rest of the piece. So, yeah, he's I mean, he's an extra. Have you ever listened to September Symphony of his?
No.
That thing hits hard. That is like, I mean, same type of just just anguish and tons of emotion. And it comes with the lament for a cappella choir at the beginning, and it's like 14 minutes long, but then gets into this September Symphony, which of course is, dedicated to 9/11. I mean, anybody writing music for that event, I don't envy them at all, but if they can pull it off, it's tough for me to criticize anything in it. So it's much like John Powell's United 93. I mean, that might not be the easiest listen in the entire world, but the fact that he had to pull that off for such a event that had happened. I mean, when did that film come out? Only a few years after 9/11.
Yeah.
And I mean, to be able to capture, you were able to kind of do that event right musically. It's one of those rare perfect scores. Absolutely perfect. Pitch perfect. Nailed it. And I cannot imagine how much pressure John Powell was under to get that right. And so, we living in this time, to think of a composer writing a symphony based on such a tragic event that happened, in our lifetime, that is just so vivid and was captured like no other, I'm going to say, disaster ever. And to get that right, Kilar freaking nails it. Absolutely nails it. Again, it's not an easy listen, but I would appreciate it for, just appreciate for the music written, and probably what Kilar had to go through in order to get that done. I mean, there's so many. Yeah, you guys can keep going, but if I could find more notes on how he wrote it and why he wrote it. But everything's in Polish.
David's got the Amazon links, I believe, in the chat. If you want to track it down. Thank you, David.
Yeah, so he wrote this because the events of affected him so much that he had to put it down, pen and paper. But poets will write poetry, and he wrote a symphony. And even he knew, writing this composition is risky business, as one can be easily accused of opportunism. That's true. But I mean, there's others. I mean, like what you said, Golden Throat wrote the Vietnam Oratorio, and then you got Penderecki's Hiroshima piece. Composers. That's why we have artists.
Yeah.
Right. Painters paint and musicians write music. And he wrote it after the first anniversary of the attack. Interesting. But yeah, give it a go. And it's his first symphony in 50 years.
Wow.
Wow. Is that what he says? You've returned to symphonic form after almost 50 years. Why? He says his first two don't really count. Wrote them when I was a student. Wow. And he promised a symphony to Antoni Witt. And so he dedicated this one to him. Wow. Yeah, I mean, it's not one you listen to every time, all the time, but it's brilliant. Any other suggestions out there that you might have enjoyed?
No. I think we took most of the suggestions from you. I mean, it was more an exploratory mission for me personally, digging around the music that I would have never even thought about listening to. So,
and that makes me happy. It does. I find much more joy in discovering the classical music of film composers than, let's say, traditional classical music. Not to say that there isn't great classical music out there, but there's just something about film composers diving into that area that I just find way more fascinating, because I think you can get a sense of hearing their actual musical voice, who they really are, and that's what's really interesting to me. But it also sounds filmic. I mean, filmic is such a hard thing to describe, but some of it sounds just filmic, and it has that sense of story beats and, beginning, middle, and end, and it just, I don't get that sense from some classical music, like that there's an actual story being told. But I like that with film composers. They think that way. So, but yeah, I mean, I got tons of this stuff. Like, I mean, I could have talked about Peter Boyer, but I don't think he's written enough film music to be considered a film composer. But he does a lot of orchestration, and he's worked in the film music industry for such a long time, but he's also written some stunning classical music and has the respect of the classical world. His stuff gets played on classical stations in the United States all of the time. And but if you ever get a chance to listen to his oh my God, the last 3 albums that he did, there's Symphony Number 1 and the other orchestral music. There's the music of Peter Boyer, and then he just did oh my God, do I even have it in here? There's a new one he just released where he recorded his music with the London Symphony Orchestra, and that's getting a ton of play on classical radio. So he kind of was on the border of, is he a classical or is he a concert hall composer or is he a film composer? But
didn't he say his primary influences were John Williams, Aaron Copland, and Leonard Bernstein?
Correct. He's Americana, true and true.
If it's not film, it's theater. So
yeah. I mean, his Celebration Overture, his Silver Fanfare, you'd swore was written by John Williams. So it's in that style, and it's just fun. It's a lot of fun. Bruce Broughton's done some stuff. Ann Dudley has written some concert music. Giacchino has written some concert music. Oh, that's the one one of these days, I don't know how he feels about it, but he performed Camden 2000 once. And that's his one and only symphony. And I have a live recording of it. It's good. And I would love it if someone recorded it. I'm shocked that people aren't taking advantage of the name Michael Giacchino and going, all right, let's record his symphony and we'll put it out there. I mean, you'd sell a bunch of records just based off the name alone. And, but yeah, he wrote a symphony, and it's not very long. I mean, I don't even think it's a true symphony. It's about, let's say 14, 20, 22 minutes long. Was that a normal length for a symphony? I don't know.
It's a bit short for a symphony, I think, isn't it?
Yeah. So, but yeah, I mean, there's a lot to, like, Johan Johansson's written some, I don't know whether it's like concert music, but he's written albums on his own. And there's just tons of stuff. I think, what about Ennio Morricone? Did he ever do anything so. Other than earlier on in his career when he was just writing non-film music?
He had such a massive output of music. It's probably buried somewhere in his discography. He must have done something outside the film world.
Yeah, you'd think he would, like something with a
Yeah.
trumpet or something,
Yeah.
at least. Oh my God, John Powell. I mean, how can you forget Hubris? It's a oh my God, brilliant choral work, absolutely brilliant. Check that one out if you can. If you like John Powell, it's just so powerful. But yeah, I mean, you can go through any of your favorite film composers and find something that is not film work, and then start exploring that. And like Tiomkin wrote a ballet, and I think Entrada released that. You know, Roja wrote a whole bunch of hymns based off his film work. It's beautiful. So yeah, go out and explore film composers' classical work. It's gratifying.
Cool.
Yeah, but I mean, I'm so glad that I was able to introduce you guys to some of this stuff. It was so fun, like earlier on when I started discovering stuff and going, oh my God, right? Here's another one. Oh my God, this is so amazing. And the fact that you guys were able to discover that now, it's gratifying. And so I hope you enjoyed the process.
Absolutely. I've got to admit that, you know, starting off with joining Facebook a couple of years ago, and then I keep saying this, meeting Daniel, get involved with this show, and just being introduced to new music all the time. It's just reinvigorated my love of this of film music, and now, you know, an even wider world of, you know, the classical music by these film composers. So it's thanks to you guys. So, you know, thank you very much for broadening my horizons. Thank you.
That's awesome.
It really is a group effort. So.
Yeah. I mean, it's this has been, yeah, this whole experience has been so much fun, and just getting to talk with, you know, kind of like-minded people, and you know, and hearing from, you know, the people listening live. It's great, and I'm glad the shows are doing well. I mean, look at the numbers, and you get some pretty high numbers compared to other videos that you do. So people are actually watching, which is nice. I mean, you know what I mean?
I actually looked at my eBay analytics this morning because reasons, but it appears that people who watch tend to watch most everything, because the hours of view, like the hour view time for the channel, is like really high.
Well, good.
For the number of channel subs.
That's what you want, man. You want that retention.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
definitely.
David's got an idea for another show: composers and their style changes with examples.
Okay.
Well, that's interesting.
It is interesting.
I think we'd have to limit it to like one composer per show.
I mean, well, I mean, there's, yeah.
I would throw James Horner out into that.
James, you'd have to throw James Horner. I don't even think you could put James Horner in that.
No, he seems to have definite periods.
Yeah, no, you're right. You're right.
Yeah.
I think you could almost do about 3 composers for a show, or maybe even more, because I mean, there's specific like singular moments where their style changed. Because
Jerry Goldsmith, obviously.
Oh yeah. I mean, God, you could do a comparison of, let's say, you know, Total Recall to whatever his next action score was after that, and it's night and day.
Yeah.
You can hear John Williams make a change in his writing in the 90s, almost after Jurassic Park or maybe The Lost World. There's a change. Horner's a tough one to pinpoint, but yeah, there was a point in the 90s where he wrote a score where almost every single future ism from a 90s score from Horner is contained in it. and you're like, huh? What? Okay. But yeah, that'd be an interesting exercise to talk about it, and maybe why it changed, and whether you like the change or not. So, but it's like, discuss, yes. Fire, water, paper. What else you got, Johnny? What else you got? Let's see if we haven't mentioned any of them. Go, list them off. But fire, water, paper was discussed, yes, in great detail. I think all three of us, would that probably be our favorite of everything that we listened to? Maybe, like, if you had to pick one, would that be it?
I didn't listen to it.
Oh, you didn't listen to it.
What? That's the one goal. That's the one golden
thought you didn't listen to. Okay. Yeah. Okay, so it's Celebration Discovery that we all agree is the greatest piece of music.
No.
Yeah, we all agree on that one. Yes.
By we, you mean like the British person and the British.
Yes, I'm going to talk louder and over the top of you.
Well, what would be the consensus then about like our like we can all agree that that's probably amazing, and
Cinema Symphony.
I think yeah. Yeah, I can't. Yeah. That's my number one. Well, what's your number one? Like, did you do it in order, or like yours?
I really liked the Aaron Copland and the Bernard Herrmann piece. I'd probably go with the Copland because I've been listening to it since college, so it's got more time with me.
Do you have the Kunzel Copland album?
Think so.
The Lincoln Portrait and Other Works.
I think so.
Okay. Yeah, I really like that album a lot. Yeah, that's a lot of fun. I mean, it's a great recording too.
My favorite Copland recording. It's an LP I got at the thrift store for like 50 cents. It's just Copland playing the piano with nothing else. It's like the best 50 cents I've ever spent.
That's fantastic. You know, speaking of solo pianos, have you heard the Mike Lang, Henry Mancini album that he did with Varese Sarabande Records?
No.
All those years ago? Stunning. Really stunning album. I mean, I think you have to appreciate improvisational jazz to get through some of the pieces. Like, some of them do go on, but it's just I'm into that. So but it's interesting to hear Mancini broken down to jazz music, piano jazz music. Really, really good. Like the Day of Wine and Roses, I think, is the name of the album, and you can find it on Spotify. Yeah, the Day of Wine and Roses. You probably find it on YouTube as well. It's beautiful. Yeah. I don't know what else I got. I mean, we could do another show where I can tell you about some more, but I did a classical composers program on my podcast, and I might do another one at some point because I think it's an important topic. That's a lot of fun to listen to and discover, and you're going to spend a lot of money listening to this show because of it.
Ian, you got anything coming up this week?
Do you know what? I haven't even thought about it. It's been a busy week up to this point, so I'm sure I'll think of something. So there'll be stuff coming out in the next few days.
Okay. I've got the third Dirty Harry movie Wednesday night with Boomer, and tomorrow night I'm recording. I think I'm still recording the show with Retro Reels. We're doing the Score Talk episode, but that won't drop. Cool. That won't drop till next month. So
that is still.
You know, he has a first name.
Retro.
It's a great idea, and I'm glad you're doing it. I think there should be a forum where fans can be interviewed. And as I said, one podcast was sort of doing that, but it's kind of There's a specific composer that they usually talk about and go down. But I think talking to fans of film music is something unique. And I still think you got to get a website going, or at least get a
Yeah.
podcast going. Get this out in the world. That's also, it's not just on YouTube, but it's in audio form, and people can listen to it and discover it. And yeah,
I'll sort that out. Yeah. And I'd like to have you on Score Talk, Eric, if you're free at some point.
Oh my God, anytime. You let me know, and I would love to chat your ear off.
I'm doing them recorded. I think that's easier for scheduling.
Yes.
And then I can just upload them. I like to upload like 2 a month. I think Sound Engraver is on for an episode.
Cool.
I'm trying to get David to come on. We could like twist the knife in him.
Do it. I'm fascinated by fan stories. I wish it was something I had time to do. Although, I mean, there's like with my Patreon, I do have 3 people that signed up for a specific tier that we host a show together once every year. And they just turn out to be like, they're only supposed to be hour-long episodes, and they turn out to be 4 hours long because we just talk and talk and talk and talk and talk. And it's like all warm and fuzzy when I chat with them. It's just great talking to fans of film music and hearing their perspective. And so I think you're offering a unique forum for people who haven't had a chance to kind of get their story out as film music fans. I mean, there's a book, what's it called? Soundtrack Nation. And it was one of the first, if not the only one, that interviewed not only professionals within film music, but they talked with fans.
I'm hoping some people from Facebook will jump in on it. But, people are shy.
Well, and that's
I was going to say you put that thing on Facebook saying, if anybody's interested, come on, I'd love to chat to you. And I loved your first chat with Dave from Skirwingle, because I mean, he's a very interesting guy. He's a great talker, but it wasn't an interview. It was a chat between 2 people who love film music. I mean, you had your questions all prepared and you were asking questions, but he was asking you questions back. It was a conversation. It wasn't just you firing questions at somebody and them answering it. It was just, it was an hour and a half, and it went by like that. It was fantastic.
Well, thank you. I thought you did a good job on your show. Spoiler alert, Ian's show is dropping next week.
I can't wait.
Yeah, neither can I.
No, but that's a very good point, Ian, because when I did, I mean, I'm not a very good interviewer. That's the reason why I don't do interviews. But when I've talked with Joe Wiles and just recently William Welch, 2 of my highest tier patrons. But we had a chat. The whole point is they come on, host a show, bring some music, and play it. But what I didn't realize what was going to happen is that, we're going to talk about, let's say, Mary Shelley's Frankenstein and Patrick Doyle, but then we just kind of like go right into his career, and then why we like this score, why we like his music, and blah 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 blah. And before you know it, it's about a 12-13 minute segment, and it's no longer now about the musical cue that he brought and we're going to play, which gets played afterwards, but it becomes this wonderful conversation between 2 film music fans who appreciate that piece and film music as a whole. And that's what's the most rewarding. And I hope that's what you're getting out of it too, Daniel. You're getting to experience so many different points of view from film music, and also hearing the great stories of how, at least I hope, how they fell in love with film music. That's always fascinating to me. Is like, where did you?
I mean, especially because growing up, I was the only one.
Right.
I was it. And it's like, is there something wrong with me? Am I a freak? But it's like, there are other people who enjoy this.
And that's what's so great about this. I mean, and it was as much as the pandemic sucks, but this is the pandemic brought us all together to do stuff like this. And of course, technology, allows us to have a live conversation from 3 different countries. And that's so rewarding. And I look forward to these conversations every Monday. Because you never know what you're going to talk about. We have a topic here, but we went on our little tangents, and but I love hearing all your perspectives and hearing from the chat and whatever. It's just so rewarding. I mean, I wish I could do this on my own, where I can, just like talk and have even my own fans come in but I just find it's easier with the three of you and just kind of go from there. But it's a great idea. I love this. And again, you got to get a website just so you can at least have a home where you go, hey, and not so much YouTube, but at least it's just, or just put this on as a podcast, just upload it, just another way for people to listen to it. Because I think this is all fascinating and all interesting.
Yeah. I'll sort out the podcast thing here shortly. I do have since I'm at the professional level of StreamYard now, I think it simulcasts to like 8 or so different outlets.
Oh, good.
Like you can do it on like YouTube and Instagram and Rumble and Tumble and Gumble and everything else. And
like I would put it out on your Facebook, or you could probably do it over TikTok. I know you'd be able to do it over Twitch. All those areas where people can just, latch onto a live stream.
See, I don't even know what Twitch is. I mean,
Twitch is basically it's a place where a lot of video game people hang out, but it's also a place where
video games have music.
Yeah, and that's what gets a lot of people in trouble over there. But like musicians hang out there, or you can just literally have a chat with somebody, open up a stream and chat with your chat or whatever, and it's interesting. But you can put this on Twitch, and that's just another. Who knows what you get over there? But yeah.
Okay, I will look into that.
So are we doing composers style changes next week, or?
I was thinking our least favorite John Williams scores.
Images. Okay.
Done. Next show.
Okay.
Well, we should probably add and why.
And why. And why. But
just specifically John Williams, can we stretch that out to a 2-hour show?
It's going to be a lot of hate.
Yeah, it's very.
Well, Johnny says that's blasphemy. Come on now, Mr. Shannon. You can't like every single thing, or can you?
I don't know. I think John Goldfarb, Please Come Home can it'll never be played again. That's for sure.
I didn't care for Family Plot.
I rarely play Family Plot. You're right.
I played it one time. I was like, okay, I'll listen to it.
I rarely play or have you Thomas and the King? You played that?
I thought Thomas and the King was okay.
I can't stand that.
Gilligan's Island. You don't have love for Gilligan's Island, man. I don't care what kind of day I've had. I can watch Gilligan's Island or I Dream of Jeannie, and I will just feel better.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of like something that I absolutely like hate. That annoys me.
Maybe hate's a strong word.
True. Or just one that would be like, oh man, I can't this might seem blasphemous, but maybe we can talk about like, what'd be an interesting topic is like, it's a classic score, but you just don't like it. For instance, The Dark Crystal. I know that everybody loves The Dark Crystal.
I don't.
Well, that theme on that high trumpet is like nails on chalkboard for me. I can't stand the way I don't know about the way it's written, the way it's played, or whatever. I can't stand that theme. So it's a score I never listen to, although I know everything surrounding it is really good. But once it hits that theme, no thanks. Nope.
In the same way, the opening of Krull, I love the score to Krull, but that opening choral, that
wow, yeah,
don't need it.
Why does Gia can't get all the films? So I can tell you why. I can absolutely tell you why. It's more than his music. That's why a lot of people get work over other people. Man, he has developed friendships. He knows what to do. He knows how to deal with whatever it is, and he gets the job done.
He did Rogue One in like a month.
Sorry?
He did Rogue One in like a month.
Well, and that's,
God bless him.
Yeah, but that's his reputation, is he's going to be able to get that job done, and he's going to get it done professionally, and it's, once you it's much like Hans Zimmer. You get that one hit and whatever, everybody wants a Zimmer score, and you just keep on going, and it also depends on how you work with people. He's a businessman. You have to be a businessman as well. Like, you have to know how to do all the behind the scenes stuff and make sure that it's getting done and done in a professional manner. So, but Giacchino has so many great relationships. He's such a personable person, and that, amongst his music or composing ability, is the reason why he gets all the jobs. And that's why most of the popular composers get all the jobs. You cannot be, for instance, Gabriel Yared and criticize a studio and expect to get more work. You cannot be Elliot Goldenthal and sue a studio, even though what he was doing was in the right, and then expect to get more work. It's just they are labeled then as problem composers. And there's other composers that'll do work, but they don't do it fast enough. Maybe they're a-holes, maybe they're this and that. So it's like, why doesn't Don Davis get more work? Well, you don't know what type of person he is. So if you got to put that into the equation, what type of people are these people? Now, Hans Zimmer, publicly it's been put out there that he's a complete a-hole. He's done some horrible stuff, but that guy is the king of film composing, and he just gets the job done. And so, but yeah, but Giacchino, I mean, I know him personally, but I knew him just before The Incredibles. I knew him writing the video game stuff, and he's, again, one of the most friendly people I know. Now, I've seen him angry. I mean, he got pissed at the Medal of Honor frontline sessions because just things weren't getting done fast enough. But, you'll have a certain amount of time with a chorus, and if they're not getting it done right, then you start dipping into extra hours, which now you're paying. I mean, think about a chorus. It's a 35-person chorus. You have to pay 35 separate people, whether it's overtime or whatnot. On top of that, you got the recording engineers and all those people. And so not only is he organizing the composition, but he's organizing all of the people and paying those people to do the work. So if it's not getting done properly, then you're burning money. So he got really frustrated at the frontline sessions. It was just a bad day. I mean, it's a long day because you got the full orchestral sessions during the morning and the afternoon, and then you have dinner, and then we were doing the choral stuff, and there's tons of choral stuff in frontline. And I even think there's portions of Mercenaries that Michael Giacchino wrote the theme for. Chris Tilden wrote the rest of the score, but things were just going at such a snail's pace, and Michael was constantly calling, and they weren't going through the choral material fast enough that they had to actually drop some of the choral material from the cues. And so there's certain cues that have no chorus that were supposed to have chorus. So, but yeah, Michael just, I mean, he's done a lot of hard work, but there's also a lot of just amazing how certain things fall into his lap. But it's based on the work that he's done previously, right? The email from J.J. Abrams, which just came out of the blue because J.J. Abrams just happened to be playing Medal of Honor and goes, I like that. So do you want to score my television show Alias? Right? Which then leads to Lost. How he got Incredibles is, I don't know. I don't know how in the world Brad Bird found him. But, I mean, think about that as your debut film score. And that hasn't happened to a lot of composers, right? Where their debut is a home run and that just kicks off their career. And, yeah. So you know, he gets The Incredibles. That does so well. And I mean, but then but Giacchino can even survive things like John Carter. Like, that's a train wreck. I like that movie, but that was a complete train wreck. But he's able to move on to other things. I don't know. There's just a way that he's able to maneuver his way into the things, and he gets everything. So, and that's the other thing is, like, when you were handed a job, I mean, you never know whether it's going to be your last job, especially in Hollywood. You got better say yes to as much as you can, because you never know when it's going to end. And so, yeah. But there's a lot that goes into it.
How about next week we just do film scores we don't care for, instead of John Williams? Because this way I can talk about some Hans Zimmer recent things that I haven't cared for.
Can we do things that we hate that isn't Hans Zimmer?
Yeah, I hate the hating on people thing.
Yeah.
You know, I don't. All right, how about, you know, try and scores that the majority of people love, but you personally don't like.
The overrated, underrated.
Overrated,
Yeah.
underrated.
Yeah.
Okay. Overrated, underrated scores.
I think that comes up. Yeah, I mean, because there's probably stuff that I like that you don't like, but it'd be interesting to have a conversation about that. So it'd be.
Sorry.
I think we gotta somehow, like, within our chat during the week, just list off a bunch of scores, but we got to figure out which ones that, you know, you might not like, Daniel, but then we might like, or else it doesn't make for an interesting conversation, because
Sure.
you'd have to hear both sides, right?
It's a difficult one to get started.
Yeah. Because, or, like, you know, scores that are maybe universally hated that you like, that might be interesting. That might be a twist on it.
That's a better
Like,
way. That's a more upbeat way of looking at things.
Yeah, because it's like, I know that a lot of people hate heartbeeps. I think it's fantastic.
I like that as well.
Right?
I enjoy heartbeeps.
You know, it's interesting because we could have talked about Commando, but now I know that your mind has changed. But we could even talk about James Horner's why those movies sound the way that they do, and I like them. But why you don't, right? But I think the how we find out what the majority of people hate or don't like, that'll be interesting. Well, maybe we can come up with a list, like, where we know that, oh my God, I'm embarrassed that I like this.
I think the best way to do it, if we each come up with lists over the next couple of days, and we'll send them to each other, and then see where there's crossover, or see where we can agree.
Yeah.
Just to get a number of films that we can just waffle about.
Yeah, I think so. Because, I mean, you can almost have a whole conversation with film music fans about James Horner's vibes. You know, people think that's the worst thing he's ever done. And I'm like, what are you talking about? No. But yeah, we should come up with a list of kind of like those universally panned film scores. And you can probably find a really good cross-section of that sort of stuff by looking on, you know, like Film Tracks or Movie Music UK, Movie Wave, you know, just through like review sites over the past 25 years, and see what kind of hasn't really stuck with people. Like, you know, do you want to talk about Social Network? Because I can't stand it, but I know the world loves it. Won an Academy Award.
When you get into that kind of thing, though, it's something that the people that love it aren't really film music fans. They're just fans of other kind of music, and they just think that music to that film is great.
Well, I mean, that's a whole other conversation you can have. It's the, you know, it's like film critics versus film music people. You know, like, if the film is good, the film score must be equally good. If the film is bad, then the film score sucks, which is totally untrue. I mean, It's an interesting topic. I'm just trying to figure out how we get focused and how we compile a list, but I guess we can talk about that over the week. But yeah, that might be interesting.
Yeah.
But if we can find like maybe like 10 universally panned film scores and then somehow try to defend them personally.
Did y'all like Avatar?
Love it. Well, yeah, that was an interesting one too. Didn't like it at first, but love it now.
Do you know what? Well, maybe we should talk about this next week. But
Yeah.
I love the film Avatar, but I always found the score a bit bland. I didn't come away thinking, "Oh, I loved the music in that scene," and I just went. Mm.
Yeah, and that's probably the interesting way of going about it.
Yeah.
And have you guys watched the Sideways? There's a channel called Sideways where he did the exploration into Avatar's music.
Yeah. Yeah, he's got a great channel.
If you haven't, go watch that because it's eye-opening. You want that, then you'll realize why Horner spent 1.5 years working on that score. But yeah, I mean, there's a ton of. I'm trying to think of. Like I know some film music people that I mean, I don't know. I find, well, we could talk about, but Blade Runner's a masterpiece. But I know many that are like, I don't know what the heck you're talking about. I think that score is fantastic. But well, anyway,
I like the end credits, but that's about it.
Yeah, I think we can work something out, I'm sure. Or maybe like we all give, I mean, can you give like a top 20 scores of all time, and then I can go, well, I don't really like that, Ian. I don't really like that. Maybe we can discuss it that way. I don't know. I mean, we might agree on everything, but I don't know. We got to figure a way of doing this that makes sense. Or we find another topic.
They need to go to a film review site, a film music review site, and then find out what are the lowest scoring reviews for that particular site by that particular person, and see if we agree. Something like that. Something we can all kind of start from the same point at, rather than
how about our favorite John Barry film scores?
John Barry's interesting.
Yeah, I love John Barry. Erik obviously not quite so much, because you could just tell from the body language there and the.
See, that's John Barry's again another one where I rarely reach for his stuff, but I have one of his scores as my top 10 of all time. But he's one I rarely reach for if I want to just listen to film music. Oh, yep, I'm in the mood for some John Barry, with the exception of a few. So I can come up with a list of 10 favorite easily.
You might come away liking John Barry more.
Oh, and absolutely, yeah. I mean, I've hung out with enough John Barry fans. I mean, there's a side Zoom chat that we have every couple of weeks, and they're just all hardcore Herman Marconi Barry fans. I mean, big time. Like sometimes there's conversations where I just stare there for like 2 hours, and I have nothing to contribute because I don't like those three composers as much as they do. So,
John Barry, it is.
Okay.
We good with John Barry?
I'm okay with John Barry.
Okay. I hate John Barry.
Said you like John Barry.
I do.
All right, we'll tackle John Barry next week. Thank you everyone for coming by today, or in the future time catching the replay. Check out Ian's channel. Erik's got a channel, and he's got a Radio Empire Cinematic Sound Radio. Check it out.
26 years old tomorrow.
Wow! Happy birthday to this radio show too. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Congratulations!
Yeah. Congratulations! Thanks. Wow. And Dirty Harry movie coming up. I was going to say Potter, but yeah, Dirty Harry coming up Wednesday night.
The Gauntlet.
Yes. Adopt, Stone Chop. Keep listening to great film music, and we'll catch all of y'all next Monday for John Barry. So break out your John Barry LPs.